Hi guys, my name is Frances Rios. I am a teacher at Chapin High School. I teach Math, Algebra 1. Today I will be demonstrating the alternating approach to teaching with virtual and face-to-face students. The first thing that I would do is I would go through my agenda. I have a daily agenda for kids aside from having a weekly agenda like the peak of the week. So the first thing that I would do is as soon as all my students get in, we will reference the agenda that I have posted on Schoology. So I'm going to go through my Schoology. My folder for that assignment is labeled, so my students know exactly where we're at every single day. I tell them as long as you know what day we're in, what today is, then you can find what your assignment is for the day. So the first thing that I go over with them, I review their student learning objective, what their standard is, what they're supposed to be able to do at the end of the lesson. And then I also have challenging questions for them every week. That way I know that they understood the main concept of it all. After doing that, we review that every day, and then I have an agenda with today's dates, and I have what our face-to-face students are doing and what our virtual students are doing. So I have two different agendas so that they can follow along wherever they're at. I also have my peek at the week for students available on Schoology so they can go in and look at it. I feel like this is the bigger concept of the whole week for the students, so they know what we're doing, what they're supposed to be learning, what their check-in activities is, and what their school activities are. I also like to make sure that they know that when our quizzes and our tests are ahead of time. My daily agenda, I have it, as I said before, posted on Schoology for them to reference, because sometimes kids have difficulty coming into Zoom or into your virtual setting because of whatever reason, their internet connection, it was overloading or whatever it was. So for those students that are late, it's actually really helpful for them to go and see their daily agenda and catch up to what they're doing. Whether you reviewed it with them or not, it's available for them there. As I said, the alternating approach is having students kind of flip around. So you're going to work with one group first, and then you're going to flip with them and then work with the other group. So you want to make sure that both groups know whether you're there with them or not, what they're supposed to be doing. My face-to-face students are the second group that I work with in this case. So what they're going to do is they're going to watch a review from what we learned in the previous days, and then they have an assignment where they're going to work on that, just reviewing what we learned. So it's basically their warm-up. They're going through relations and functions so that they understand and remember what they did before so that they can connect it to our lesson today. Then they're going to have a lesson when they come back with me on domain and range of graphs, and then they have their exit ticket. For virtual, we're going to work with virtual first. So I'm going to teach them their lesson, and then after that, they have their independent practice, and then they have exit ticket as well. So both of them have the same exit ticket because at the end of class, we also come back together. The second thing I would do after we do our reviewing of the agenda is I would do a SAL check. I would do a check-in with them. So this check-in is on Schoology as well. As you know, SAL checks can be either group, individual, whole class activities, whatever you think is more comfortable for that specific activity. For this case, I am going to do an individual activity, and then I am going to have whoever wants to share their response with me. So they can go into this check-in on Schoology, and it's a conversation, but I set it to where only I can see their comments, because if somebody wants to tell me something and not everybody else, then I want them to be comfortable with just letting me know about anything that they want to. So I asked them to tell me something interesting or boring, something that I would never think about asking. So this is where you get to know your students more on a one-on-one basis and build that connection with them, even though they are virtual or they are face-to-face, but still with that social distancing. Going back to the folder for that day, I would one more time remind my students, now that we've done the checkup, that I am going to be working with virtual students first today. So face-to-face, you have to go and do your assignment. So after we break up, I would have the review video available for my face-to-face students, as well as having their review assignment. So those can be found on Schoology. I always name my assignments or whatever they have to do exactly the way that they're going to see them on Schoology, so that they can find them and reference them more easily. With my face-to-face students, I would be going over the lesson of domain and range of graphs. When I'm teaching with my mini lessons, these lessons are usually anywhere between 20, 30, 35 minutes. So that way I have the ability to flip and still have enough time to cover what I'm supposed to be covering with both of my groups. So I would ask my virtual students, since those are the ones that I'm starting with, to go ahead and take out their notebooks. I would be projecting my notebook on Zoom on a virtual way, and then we would go ahead and start our lesson. They would copy their notes down in their notebook, and they would follow along. So on Schoology, they could go back after we're done with the mini lesson, and they would go to their domain and range assignments, and they would start working on it. So on this one, it's more of a assignment where they have to copy it down in their notebooks and either send me a screenshot of it, scan it, and use any resources. These are resources already that I've gone with them as well. So I know that they have the ability to somehow send me the work, whether it's just going to be written and there's a picture and they snap it and send it to me, whether they scan it, or whether they just have a way to write it on Word and send it to me. So they already know the different ways that they can submit their work for me. They would follow the instructions on Schoology. In this case, they're finding the domain and range of the functions and determining whether or not they are functions. As the students are working on these, as my virtual students are working on this, we already went through the lesson. I would give them some time and then refocus my face-to-face students so that they could come back to learning this mini lesson together. So then we would go over the same lesson again. I would now project my notes to my face-to-face students. So I would do it either in my Blackboard, or I would do it writing down on the whiteboard, or whatever I feel is more comfortable for that lesson. And then they would be copying things down. Also, in this case, since they are face-to-face, I could print out graphs if it's easier for me, or if it would be easier for them to read them that way instead of having to copy graphs. So it's, again, whatever you feel is the best way to approach that given lesson with your students. After doing the mini lesson with my students, then I would go back and give them the same assignment that I gave my virtual students that they should now be finishing up. So now you have both of your groups back at the same place. You've taught the lesson, you've reviewed what you previously learned, and they've both worked on that assignment that you had after it. Maybe your virtual students or your face-to-face students did not completely finish that assignment, but that's okay, because you have an exit ticket. You have a little bit of time at the end where they can finish that assignment, or where they can get caught up on anything else that they need. So at the end of my lesson, I would go to my exit ticket, and this is usually an informative assessment for me. We would have a discussion. You would have an exit ticket, or we would reestablish and make sure that we reinforce those very important topics that we reviewed that day. So we would have a discussion. I would have, this is the time where I have clarification for any doubts that they had, whether it was during the lesson or whether it was when they were looking at the assignments, or, if there was a question that they didn't understand. This is the time in my exit time where they have time to do all of that. They can have time to finish their assignments. I can clarify any questions. They can ask any doubts that they have. And also, it's a really good way for you to do an informative assessment and ask your students for understanding.